Well, you've likely heard a lot of stories of pilots being forced out of their jobs after they blew the whistle on some misconduct within the airline industry or because of their refusal to take the COVID vaccine. But you've likely never heard of a pilot losing his license to protect a federal informant who is a federal convict responsible for heinous crimes. Multiple government agencies went out of their way to protect this criminal while sabotaging anyone who got in their way, including whistleblowers. So, what's exactly going on here? Mark Harris is that pilot who, in many ways, had his life destroyed by the federal government. And he joins us now to tell his story. Mark, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I've been very much looking forward to this.
Well, maybe you can walk our audience back here and sort of set the stage for what unfolded and how this happened.
Well, let me start towards the end and then we'll rewind. When really all hell broke loose in my life was in early 2010. I had been battling since 2008. It started with a simple restraining order I filed to protect my kids, and it resulted in my kids being kidnapped, victims and witnesses to horrible crimes, sexually assaulted, exploited in child pornography, witness to a murder and a lynching. And so now we fast forward to 2010. The perpetrator, it was my ex-father-in-law, a convicted white supremacist, some sort of imperial wizard of sorts. On January 21 of 2010, I emailed the Niceville Police Department, wanted to make an appointment to go in to report a murder that my kids had told me that they witnessed, a gruesome murder that was followed up by hanging the body from a tree and burning it, and that they both witnessed and ultimately ended up testifying to. The very next day, I went and got my annual medical exam for the FAA, which, it's a routine thing I've been doing for 11 years with no issues. Of course, it was approved with no issues. There was nothing out of the ordinary to report. So January 25, 4 days after I emailed the Niceville Police Department, who never responded, Michael Nobles, my ex-father-in-law, who was holed up in South America, hiding in South America until things blew over, emailed Delta Airlines customer service with this litany of allegations against me that I came to work drunk, that I lied on my job applications, false allegations about my mental health, about my military service, and so forth. Now, let me backtrack a little bit. The Niceville Police Department never responded to that email, and that was the third time I tried to report this murder to the Niceville Police Department. Go back to the previous November, I tried to make a report. I was faced with a bad cop routine where a Niceville police officer and signing with a mob hitman, Joseph Joey Forgione, threatened to arrest me if I filled out an affidavit and threatened to go after my job with false allegations that I was mentally ill. Rewind prior to that, and back to 2009, I had tried to contact the Niceville Police Department saying I wanted to make an appointment to report this murder. They stalled for time. I said, yeah, come in next week. In the meanwhile, the murderer himself was on a plane with his family to South America, where they went into hiding for about a year or so. So back to 2010, I'm trying to get this murder investigated. And February 8th, I show up to work like normal, check in, log back into the computer to print out my schedule, and I've been removed from the schedule. Next thing you know,
at Delta Airlines.
Actually, the email went to Delta Airlines. I was working at Atlantic Southeast Airlines. They forwarded the email to the airline I worked for. So I get removed from the schedule. I'm escorted to the chief pilot's office, escorted from the chief pilot's office to the director of human resources, James Brimberry. This is not in my book. My book is Houses of the Holy, because I just learned about it a couple of months ago. It turns out James Brimberry, just like my ex-father-in-law, as at least an accused sexual predator. He's now being held without bond in Georgia for raping and torturing foster kids, exploiting foster children in child pornography, just like my ex-father-in-law had been doing. Also a former foster parent, both of them hiding behind religion. It turns out Brimberry had been communicating with Nobles and Niceville police officer Joey Forgione. So they were setting me up to sabotage my career. Brimberry forces me to go get an evaluation. I've got the email over here. Let's see. What demands I go see our flight surgeon. He refers to him as our flight surgeon and our company doctor. Well, the doctor they sent me to was not the company doctor. The company didn't have a doctor. He was a hand-picked doctor who was about to engage in a career assassination of me. Another right-wing extremist, just like my ex-father-in-law, Dr. Charles Richard Harper. Dr. Harper was a pal of Dr. Michael Berry, the FAA's top doctor at the time. Dr. Berry was a former medical director for Johnson Space Center. His father was the doctor at NASA who picked the Apollo astronauts. Dr. Berry has been featured in the Washington Examiner and the San Francisco Chronicle as the author of The Berry Scheme. It was a scheme devised to target whistleblower pilots to sabotage their careers. So I'm subjected to a completely illegal urinalysis, illegal because there was no reasonable suspicion. Allegation from a madman, federal convict hiding in South America, whose motive was obvious, is not reasonable suspicion for a drug test. Anyway, I passed, of course, with flying colors. So Dr. Harper then demands I go see a psychiatrist for a psychological evaluation. Again, a hand-picked psychiatrist that they're paying off through doctor reports. Another ultra-right-wing extremist or racist based on his social media posts. Pro-CIA, Islamophobic guy. And sends me to this Dr. Michael Haberman, who performs in a psychological evaluation. I go home, and the next day I'm arrested, handcuffed, shackled, locked in a holding cell for 6 days in Florida, labeled crazy, pending a psychological evaluation.
Wait, they can just arrest you because a doctor says that you failed a psychological
arrested me
event?
for allegedly making a false report of murder, although I never actually made a report because they blocked me from making a report and threatened me when I tried to make a report. So,
and the murder happened.
There's zero doubt in my mind the murder happened. I don't know who the victim was. It's never been solved because it's never been investigated. To this day, even though both of my kids testified as a result of being forced to testify against me, their father, it blew up in the prosecutor's face. They testified that their felon grandfather had an arsenal of weapons, murdered a man, and took the body to the woods and hung it from a tree and burned it and made them watch. And one of my sons dropped a big bombshell that there was a man accompanying him dressed up like a police officer. Now, you put that in the context that the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Department armed this man as a felon, handed over an arsenal of weapons to him. The Niceville Police Department destroyed evidence, computer equipment, helped get rid of some of his guns and so forth. I mean, the law enforcement agencies in Florida were running around in circles cleaning up after this guy frantically and repeatedly trying to frame me and label me crazy, even though there was absolute proof of the state and federal firearms violations, absolute proof of sexual abuse. I believe there was proof of murder, but there were 5 identified crime scenes identified by the kids that were never examined. No witnesses were ever interviewed. And to this day, my children have never been interviewed regarding a murder they testified to. Law enforcement refused to interview them, refused to take a report. So anyway, so now I'm fighting for my freedom and my career. By the way, they tried to frame me in 2 counties in Florida simultaneously, Walton County and Okaloosa County. So then I'm scheduled for a full battery of psychological tests with the Dr. Fiona Hill, which I passed with absolute flying colors. In fact, she says I'm doing exceptionally well given the circumstances. So Dr. Harper then sends this email, or not an email, faxes this letter to the headquarters at FAA and says, asked that I be put in given a special issuance medical certificate and be put in a program for alcoholics, claiming I have a history of alcohol abuse that they pulled out of thin air. The very next day, this woman in Oklahoma City plants a fake DUI in my records. And then Dr. William Mills, who's had no authority to take any action on my medical certificate, sends me a letter saying my application dated the prior January disclosed a history of alcohol abuse, and that application was denied. Well, we're getting into details of rules here, but that after 60 days, that application could not be denied. It's written in stone. Furthermore, the application didn't disclose anything regarding alcohol because there was nothing to disclose. So now we're talking about complete smoke and mirrors here. Absolute criminal fraud.
So can we back up a second? So sure. You said a woman in Oklahoma City just puts a DUI on your record. Like, how does that happen?
Exactly. And as of March of this year and my FOIA request, they still refuse to explain where this mythical DUI came from. It appeared in the notes in my FAA records. I ended up getting my FAA medical records, and there was an entry oddly worded. It says, releasing to DUI as requested. Well, I'm about to come up to a report written by another doctor that says I had a DUI in 1998, claimed I had treatment in the military and everything. All of it absolutely, totally made up.
So you've never had a DUI?
No, never had a DUI or anything like a DUI. So
had you ever been to Oklahoma City?
No. This was an FAA employee who in Oklahoma City, at FAA headquarters in Oklahoma City, who put this in my record.
So it seems like, I mean, if sitting back from, it seems like this is a massive, like, coordinated attack on you.
Oh, absolutely, it was, and fast forward, I asked for my medical records, so then they changed their story. I get a letter from a Dr. Steve Goodman in the Pacific region of the FAA, where I've never worked or lived. So there's no reason this guy should be sending me a letter saying my appeal of my medical certification was denied due to a history of alcoholism. So now they've denied an appeal I never made to prevent me from appealing and changed alcohol abuse to alcoholism, even though I'd never been diagnosed with alcoholism or never had the symptoms of alcoholism. Then I ended up getting issued this special issuance medical certificate, labeling me as defective, basically, limiting me to being a first officer, because you have to have a first-class medical to be a captain, labeling me as an alcoholic. That special issuance medical certificate was total fraud as well. I never requested it. I never had an exam for it. I never filled out an application for it. They just gave it to me. So again, they gave me a fake medical certificate. And then fast forward, I know we got limited time. Fast forward a year later, on a whole lot of stuff was going on in Florida relative to my ex-father-in-law. I'm being stalked, harassed, and threatened, and death threats and so forth. So the next year, they say I have to get a psychological evaluation annually for this program they put me in, this abominable program. I know Carlene Pettit mentioned it in her book. It's called the HIMSS program, riddled with privacy abuses and just, awful program supposedly it's to save pilots' careers who get DUIs and so forth. So they put me in this program, and I'm forced to use the very doctor who committed the fraud as my sponsor, even though there are 40 plus sponsors in the whole system, 2 in Florida where I live. I have to fly to Atlanta to use the guy who sabotaged my career, Dr. Harper, as my sponsor and pay him for the fraud he committed. So again, fast forward a year, I have to get an annual psychological evaluation, another hand-picked psychiatrist, another old ex-military doctor, excuse me, who finds I don't meet criteria for alcoholism or alcohol abuse. Then Dr. Harper's not happy with that, gets him to amend his report, claiming that I have a history of alcoholism from the military, which again, they made up. So he's amended his report. Fast forward another year, I'm starting to, a lot of people are starting to raise questions about this. I'm having to go through all these programs and meetings and everything. And the people involved are saying, why are you here? You don't belong here, trying to get me released. And Dr. Harper clams up, lawyers up. And it's time for my annual psychological evaluation again. I get a referral. I'm going to a guy who's fully qualified, used by this program, authorized by the FAA to do it. They refuse to take his evaluation, say, I got to go back to the doctor who amended his report and lied the year before, or else. And that's when I threw my hands up and said, enough is enough. I'm going to appeal this. I ended up without work. My unemployment blocked, my appeal for my unemployment blocked, blacklisted in the whole state of Georgia, couldn't get a job, ganged up in court by Sally Quillian Yates, the former acting attorney general, Stuart F. Dellery, former White House chief counsel, 4 other top FAA and DOT attorneys, simultaneously ganged up with 6 law firms hired by 2 of these doctors. And the company hired 2 law firms to gang up on me. And I'm representing myself, trying to address all this in court because I'm broke. No lawyer will represent me. I'm out of money, and they target me with threats from the IRS to seize my assets. Somebody threatens to burn my house down if I don't drop the case and so forth. So that's where I ended up in 2013. And since I've clawed my way back, I still don't have a medical, can't hold a medical because I won't lie for the government. But I am back in aviation. Ironically, I'm actually authorized by the FAA. I issue pilot's licenses. I perform exams for pilots. I determine their safety, but I can't fly an airplane because I won't lie for the government. In total in Florida, they tried to frame me 7 times. One time they actually locked me in a cage for 6 days, no change of clothes, no visitors, denied bond. And you wouldn't believe the things they pulled to cover this man's track, like the sheriff bailing him out of jail personally, and so forth.
So I know you're knee deep in it. You've been knee deep in it for years. And all of these details come flooding, out of your brain. I'm sitting here trying to wrap my head around why would they go to such great lengths to protect this person? So at the heart of it, it seems that's what they were doing. This individual who committed these murders, the federal government was going out of its way to protect and shield this guy. And when you raised questions about him murdering people, they came after you. Do I understand that correctly?
Well, they came after me when I reported sexual abuse. A therapist, when they kidnapped the kids, a therapist made a report that required an Amber Alert. They tried to frame me in 2 counties and through the Florida Department of Children and Families for false reporting, for making that report that I didn't make, which was not false. So that's kind of how the things got kicked off. So again, 3 avenues trying to frame me on a report made by a therapist. And then fast forward.
So a therapist made this report
that
the children were being sexually abused by your ex-father-in-law.
And that they were, she had grave concern for their physical safety because they'd been kidnapped. And a child protection investigator, Jennifer Clark, found my kids. One of them had been beaten black and blue. He had a badly infected black eye. that he'd been assaulted by one of my ex-wife's family members. She covered that up, tried to frame me for false reporting, told my ex-wife to hide the kids and file a false restraining order against me while she was trying to put me in prison. and this just that pattern continued. I mean, the EEOC, the Department of Health and Human Services, the U.S. Department of Labor. You wouldn't believe the pile of records I have. All these agencies lying, spending, stonewalling. Big shot officials from the Justice Department have letters with their signatures. Roy Austin, Calvin Shivers, big shots to the Justice Department and FBI, claiming that there were no federal crimes committed. I can document dozens of federal crimes that have been committed. Crimes committed against me and sabotaging my career, federal crimes in this debacle with the FAA, federal firearms violations, federal crimes of, child pornography and so forth. And, but that, that's the spin. I'm just a crazy guy making false allegations. Now, there ended up being at least 18 reports regarding my kids. None of them received any investigation. Law enforcement refused. Reports made by a medical doctor, a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a therapist, a school principal, a law enforcement officer, all basically made to disappear into a black hole. Now, I've gone through all the records. I've decoded who did it, how they did it, how they made this happen. And that's, complicated and more in depth than we have time for in this interview. But it was extremely transparent. This man was being protected, and anybody who tried to expose him was going to be targeted. And I wasn't the only one. There was another family who tried to help me and my kids that my ex-father-in-law used, as a means to, pass threats and so forth. They decided to help me and testify for me and my kids, and they were harassed by local law enforcement, by child protection services, by my ex-father-in-law, threatening their kids, harassing her elderly mother, riding his motorcycles back and forth in front of her house just to harass her. He threatened to slit my kids' throats, shoot and kill me, kill my kids' pets, just terrorize anybody who got in his way with immunity.
So why were they trying to protect this guy? Have you gotten to the heart of why the federal government was going out of the
tangled web of right-wing extremists, neo-Confederates, organized crime, and he was involved in these shell corporations created by this guy in South Florida, who, through him, you've got mobsters, international weapons traffickers, politicians, two known associates who were advisors to two different presidents. So, I've spent many, many years trying to answer that question, the why. I don't know if there's a one answer, but I put all the
It sounds like a Jeffrey Epstein kind of story, like all of these people.
We haven't got into that part yet, and I'm glad you make that up, because I found a network of people. I found other related cases, one particular involving foster kids, where neighbors said this whole family, including the foster kids, disappeared in the middle of the night. I think it was back in 2001, leaving a cache of child pornography and cameras and computer equipment and stuff behind. The foster parent, excuse me, I'm getting over pneumonia literally, but the foster parent in that case was a French national, French citizen. And, I'm not trying to be political here, but this is a thing I found on the internet recently. He was a contributor to the National Republican Congressional Committee. And he had business partners that were, one was a Pentagon official, one was a Church of Christ minister, and my ex-father-in-law was a Church of Christ elder. All of his business partners were Church of Christ deacons and elders, all involved in all sorts of shady activities and tied to shady characters, hiding behind religion. He married, my ex-father-in-law married a minor, became a Christian school board president, youth group chaperone for teenagers, a deacon in charge of children's programs in another church. So pretty much fits the profile. And, I saw 3 times on 3 different computers of his evidence of child pornography, particularly young children and incest.
So, I mean, we know we've covered it extensively here on the show, the government's deep involvement with the child sex trafficking operations under the Biden administration specifically, but going back well into the Clinton years through these NGOs, these non-governmental organizations, protecting members of the federal government, using all sorts of nefarious, setups to hand these children off, make them disappear. It's a massive operation. So
Yeah.
do you think that your ex-father-in-law was a part of that?
Absolutely. No question whatsoever. And again, I've been able to decode the formula they used. You literally had, I mean, this is Orwellian stuff, and it sounds like, stuff of conspiracy theories, but this stuff really happened. You have a situation where you have victims of human trafficking being provided by the state, foster kids. Then
Right.
you have the agency who's placed these kids in these homes being used as an alibi for law enforcement agencies to say, we don't have to investigate those crimes because the agency who put the kids there says nothing happened. And of course, as you probably know, and I know, I've learned the hard way, that child protection agencies have no authority whatsoever to investigate crimes against children. They're there to help provide services, to help provide, placement of children who are removed from their parents and so forth. But if there's an allegation of a crime against a child, law enforcement is bound to document that in a report, assign it to an investigator, and investigate. But through 18 reports, they refused to do that in my case, and kept using the Florida Department of Children and Families as an alibi, while the Florida Department of Children and Families was funneling cases to the same 3 investigators over and over again, blocking other investigators from completing investigations. And those 3 investigators were shredding documents, falsifying reports, trying to label me crazy, or bring false reporting cases against me. Not only that, they went beyond that. They kept over and over again trying to put my kids in the home of this monster, knowing he was a monster, to shut them up so he could control them. They blocked my kids from getting mental health care services. I mean, I made sure they did, but there were services available at the Child Advocacy Center. They blocked that. They didn't want my kids talking, period. So, but my kids did talk, and they talked to anybody who would listen.
And do they talk today? I mean, do they talk about this case?
They don't like to talk about it. My youngest at the time, I'm remarried, have a new family, 2 young kids. My older boys are grown now. They've been with me. Their mother. I don't know what. I thought she was done with all this. I thought she'd separated herself from all this. But I learned a couple of years ago, she and her new husband and some other family members are all with her father and mother on a little family compound in Harrison, Arkansas, the headquarters of the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, which is ultimately what this guy really is. My oldest son, he will talk about it some. He doesn't like to. I try not to bring it up too often, but he has a very clear memory of the events. My 21-year-old doesn't really remember the bad things. He's kind of blocked it out. He was only 4 at the time. So
when did you learn about that? Like that your children were being sexually assaulted? I mean, where were you? Were you guys separated at the time or divorced?
Well,
they were visiting?
just separated, and they almost immediately began being sexually abused by my ex-wife's younger sisters, who were adolescents at the time. My kids were 4 and 6 years old. They were molesting other kids because guess what? They had been molested. And that led to multiple reports were made, shut down, no investigation. I finally had to file a restraining order to protect the kids because she wasn't protecting them, and I had no other way of doing it. That's when he plotted to Baker Act me, try to have me involuntary committed for psychological observation for believing my kids were molested, and ended up kidnapping the kids. Let me read you, I know we're getting running out of time, a few excerpts of what some of the professionals have said. This is a woman who specialized in treating sexual trauma victims in the Navy. Post-traumatic stress disorder, both display significant post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms. There's no question, because of their absolute fear of their grandfather, because of their reports of sexual contact, sexual abuse. One of the boys described he was made to bleed, and the other witnessed that. Made to bleed? Yes. Anal penetration, sir. Very specific about that. Also very specific that the grandmother got a tissue. Very specific detail. Now, I've got tons of this with lots of different people. Chronic post-traumatic stress disorder. Let's see.
I mean, this stuff is awful. How did you, I mean, as a father,
history having to take pictures of his sibling being offended. Gabe was forced to take pictures of his little brother being sexually abused along with the other two girls, and there were multiple perpetrators, and they drew pictures of it. One of the guys is wearing a ski mask, so he can't be identified. The grandfather is wearing a gun, and just like this Brimberry guy, this HR representative who went on to Delta Airlines, it's one of the things in their police report. He was using a firearm to coerce children and young children under 10 years old in sex acts.
It's so unbelievable. I mean, what is Delta Airlines' kind of official statement about this? Have they ever spoken publicly about this and apologized to you?
And that's why I'm here with you. And I really appreciate people like you out there, because you would think the program manager for equal opportunity at Delta Airlines being arrested for raping and torturing foster kids and exploiting them in child pornography would be a big story. The press will not report it. They won't report it. I've reached out to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. There was a little blurb in the police blotter in the Jasper newspaper where he lived. That's it. No one will report the story. No one would report when my ex-father-in-law, was reported 18 times for sexual abuse with no investigation. No one would report when he was caught red-handed with an arsenal of guns and ammo as a felon. No one will report any aspect of this except for people like you in podcast, my publisher, Chris Milligan. And that's, it baffles me. I've learned the hard way that these people in powerful positions can keep things out of the press. So,
yeah, they can make stories go away. They pressure people. They come after people. They threaten them in different ways.
And we saw with the Catholic Church scandal too, the same things happened there. The press would not report that for years. They were threatened and intimidated by the church. And, it's always a different version of the same story with the Boy Scouts, the Catholic Church, and the Olympic gymnast, and it never ends. So.
Did your ex-father-in-law, I'm sorry, did he worked for Delta?
Oh, no. Okay. No, I'm talking about the program manager for Delta Airlines was the human resources director at my airline. He's the one who set me up to sabotage my career, colluding with my ex-father-in-law, both of them accused pedophiles and child rapists, both of them former foster parents. So imagine having
it's amazing to me. So
by two monsters like that.
How high do you think that this goes? And by the way, whatever happened to that Delta Airlines program manager? Fired? Probably promoted.
Well, no, he's being held without bond, which is where my ex-father was. Yeah. So.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like this goes very, very high.
It does.
Have you been able to track exactly how high this goes? You were in Florida. Who was Attorney General at the time? Was it Pam Bondi?
Pam Bondi. Yeah. So, and I'm not going to give her personal credit. Her office deemed my kids crime victims and awarded them crime victims compensation to help pay for their mental injuries. But that was after local law enforcement tried to block it, saying that no crimes had been committed, and I wasn't their father because I'm not their biological father, but I was always their legal father. So I drove to Tallahassee with my pile of records, camped out at the Attorney General's office so somebody would talk to me, and they approved the crime victims compensation, which didn't give them any money, just helped pay for the treatment, helped pay for the deductibles and copays and so forth. So, I've got a letter from the Chief Inspector of Florida Department of Law Enforcement, Mark Perez. I got an email from Rick Scott. They're all doing the same thing, all spinning, deflecting. You can contact the abuse hotline. Well, you don't contact the abuse hotline when kids have been said they've been raped and exploited in child pornography. That's law enforcement. And at a minimum, state law enforcement involvement, if not federal. So
right. What do you hope happens next?
Yeah, I want to get the story out. The only degree of justice my kids will ever likely see is to have the public know what happened. That has been was a big part of their trauma and a big part of my trauma. I mean, I'm being treated for PTSD because of all this. Is the retaliation and the smear and discredit campaign. Having the world say, or the America, so to speak, say nothing happened to you. You imagine it all. It was all made up because it wasn't made up. And so this is my only means of seeing that it's not buried forever. And I want to educate other people so it doesn't happen to them. I'm hoping maybe some other people will come forward and speak out. But I've said this in other interviews, and I've told my publisher this. This quit being about my ex-father-in-law a long time ago. There are plenty of monsters like him out there. This is about, the people who were supposed to protect my kids and other kids from people like him, betraying the kids, and for whatever reason, however important he was as an informant or whatever capacity he was an agent for the government, he should not have been given free rein to rape and torture children. So,
how bad is the foster care system in the United States?
Horrible. I haven't done a massive amount of research on that, but I started looking at how many. The statistics on sexual abuse and human trafficking of foster kids is horrible. But one of the most horrible statistics is how many of them are missing. And nobody cares. That's why they're so disposable. The state of Florida twice in writing has stated there's no record that Mike Nobles was ever a foster parent. Now, I've got his own testimony about being a foster parent, the transcript of it. I've got pictures of some of the foster kids. I've got copies of a journal that one of the foster kids gave my ex-wife. But that's how it goes. They've sanitized his whole record, but they've deleted those foster kids from existence. And then you have, the case in Walton County where they disappeared. So they're disposable. That's how I see it, is they're the perfect victims because they can just be erased and nobody cares, nobody looks for them.
That's why the massive child sex trafficking operation of illegal immigrants is so profitable in the United States. We don't even have their names. They disappear. They're used and abused, sexually abused, turned into sexual, slaves, disposed of and killed.
Yep. And I have concerns that that's what happened to some of these foster kids. I know my ex-wife had horrible psychological problems from her own abuse and wrote a bunch of very gruesome things. One was a reference to infanticide and digging holes to bury children. She wasn't specific about the details, but I know my children saw their grandfather dig a hole to bury an adult and dug the body back up and hauled it out and burned it. So what's to say he hasn't killed children? I think he probably has.
I mean, it's safe to say, Mark, this is one of the most disturbing stories I've ever heard. And I feel awful that you had to go through this. And I hope that maybe getting the story out there will help bring some justice in some small way to you and your family. And hopefully to Delta Airlines too. Hopefully Delta will respond to this.
Yeah,
As the
I
story
think
gets
they
out.
should. I think they need to, well, there was another party involved who authorized all this nonsense with my medical certification. That's Brad Sheehan. He's still the vice president of flight operations at Delta Airlines. He circled the wagons, hung me out to dry because the company got their hands dirty in all this. So, he doesn't need to apologize to me. It'd be nice for him to apologize to my kids for what they suffered when I got put out of work, lost my medical insurance while they were in treatment for the crimes committed against them and so forth. So, I'd love to see an apology from the state of Florida, from the federal government to my kids as well. I don't expect to let them get it, but it'd be nice.
Mark Harris, former Delta pilot, unbelievable story.
ASA,
thank you for sharing.
ASA pilot. I never actually worked for Delta. Just want to clear that. But thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. We've got an audiobook coming out in 3 or 4 weeks probably, and that will complement the books Houses of the Holy. And just thank you for helping me get the story out there.
My pleasure. Mark, thank you.